The studio lights glowed brighter than usual that evening. Outside, fans pressed against the barricades, hoping to catch a glimpse of the guests arriving for one of the most-watched late-night shows in America. Inside, producers moved quickly, adjusting microphones and checking camera angles. The audience buzzed with excitement. Tonight's episode promised sparks. Two major stars were scheduled to appear together for the first time. When the band struck its intro music and the host stepped onto the stage, applause thundered through the room. This wasn't just another celebrity interview. It felt like something unpredictable was about to unfold. The host began with his usual charm, building suspense before announcing the first guest, Keanu Reeves. The crowd erupted into cheers. Keanu walked out with his signature modest smile, dressed in a simple black suit that looked elegant without trying too hard. He waved shyly, shook the host's hand, and took a seat. There is something different about him compared to most stars. No exaggerated confidence, no dramatic gestures, just calm presence. Even the way he sat, slightly leaned forward with his hands folded, showed a quiet respect for the moment. The applause didn't just feel loud, it felt genuine. A few minutes later, the host introduced the second guest, an A-list actor known as much for his box office hits as for his outspoken personality. He entered with flair, pointing at the crowd, flashing a wide grin, and adjusting his expensive designer jacket as cameras zoomed in. The audience cheered again, though this time the energy was more electric than warm. He slapped the host on the back, took a seat beside Keanu, and leaned comfortably into the couch as if he owned the room. The contrast between the two men was immediate and impossible to ignore, one radiating loud charisma, the other quiet composure. At first, the conversation flowed lightly. The host joked about upcoming movie releases, filming challenges, and crazy stunt experiences. The louder actor dominated the discussion, interrupting occasionally, throwing in sarcastic comments that drew easy laughs. Keanu mostly listened, smiling politely, occasionally offering short, thoughtful answers when prompted. The audience didn't mind. They seemed content watching the dynamic play out. But underneath the laughter, there was a subtle shift in tone. The second actor began glancing sideways at Keanu more often, as if measuring him. His jokes started to carry an edge, playful on the surface, but sharper underneath. As the cameras rolled and millions watched from home, no one realized that the mood of the entire show was about to change. What began as friendly banter was slowly drifting into something else, something personal. The audience still smiled, unaware that a single sentence, spoken carelessly in front of the world, would soon freeze the room in silence. And when that moment came, the contrast between ego and humility would become impossible to ignore. The laughter in the studio was still echoing when the host decided to stir the pot a little. With a playful grin, he turned toward Keanu. "You've always had this mysterious, quiet energy," he said. "Even now, you're just sitting there calmly while your co-star is setting the couch on fire." The audience chuckled. It was harmless, the kind of light teasing talk shows thrive on. Keanu smiled modestly, shrugging slightly as if to say he didn't mind at all. But before he could respond, the other actor leaned forward, seizing the moment. "Yeah," he said loudly, smirking toward the crowd. "I guess when you only play the same brooding guy in every movie, you don't really need that much range or that many words." A wave of laughter burst from parts of the audience, louder than before, but uneven. Some people clapped, others hesitated. The joke hung in the air just a second too long. The cameras immediately cut to Keanu Reeves. He didn't flinch, his expression barely changed. He simply pressed his lips together in a small, polite smile and gave a soft nod, as though he'd heard far worse in his life. The host shifted slightly in his chair, sensing the tension. "Oh, wow," he laughed nervously, trying to keep things light. Coming in hot tonight, but the actor wasn't finished. He leaned back casually, crossing one leg over the other. "I mean, don't get me wrong," he continued, raising his hands in mock innocence. "It works. People love it. You find one character, ride it for 20 years, that's a strategy." This time, the laughter was thinner. A few uncomfortable coughs slipped through the audience. The band members exchanged glances. Something had changed. what was meant to be playful now felt pointed. The camera once again focused on Keanu. He looked down briefly, then back up at the host. His calm demeanor didn't crack, but the silence around him grew heavier. The insult wasn't just about acting, it was about credibility, about talent, about suggesting that his success was accidental or repetitive. Social media feeds were already lighting up in real time. Viewers at home began typing furiously. Some defended him, others waited to see how he'd respond. The studio audience leaned forward in anticipation. Would he fire back? Would he defend his career? Or would he let it slide? For a few seconds, no one spoke. The host opened his mouth as if to move on to another question, but even he seemed unsure how to recover the atmosphere. The spotlight felt brighter now, harsher somehow. The confident grin on the other actor's face suggested he believed he had won the moment, that the audience would side with boldness over quiet restraint. But what he didn't understand was that sometimes silence carries more weight than the loudest comeback. And in just a few breaths, Keanu was about to respond. Not with anger, not with sarcasm, but with something that would shift the entire room. The silence stretched just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. The host cleared his throat softly, ready to jump in and redirect the conversation. The other actor leaned back confidently, clearly satisfied with the reaction he had stirred. And then, slowly, Keanu Reeves adjusted in his seat. He didn't rush. He didn't roll his eyes. He didn't force a laugh. Instead, he gave a small nod, as if thoughtfully considering what had just been said. Well, Keanu began quietly, his voice calm but steady. I've been very lucky in my career. The audience fell completely silent. Even the band stopped shifting in their seats. Lucky to work with incredible directors. Lucky to have amazing stunt teams. Lucky to tell stories that connected with people. He paused, not for drama, but as if choosing his next words carefully. There was no bitterness in his tone. No hidden jab. Just honesty. He glanced briefly toward the other actor, not with confrontation, but with sincerity. And you're right, he continued, offering a faint smile. I do tend to play characters who are searching for something. Purpose, redemption, peace. A few members of the audience nodded unconsciously, but I think that's because most of us are. That line landed differently. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't clever. It was human. And suddenly, the joke that had felt sharp moments ago now seemed shallow. The host leaned forward, intrigued. The energy in the room had shifted. Not explosive, but profound. Keanu continued, his voice soft yet clear. I've also been lucky to survive things in my life that taught me what really matters. The crowd listened more closely now. Some knew parts of his past, the tragedies, the losses, the struggles he rarely spoke about publicly. So, if I play characters who are quiet, who are trying to do the right thing, maybe that's because I believe those stories matter. His eyes briefly scanned the audience. No arrogance, no performance, just presence. The other actor's confident posture began to fade. He adjusted his jacket, forcing a small chuckle that didn't quite land. But the laughter didn't return. The audience wasn't looking at him anymore. They were watching Keanu, not as a movie star but as a person. What started as a mocking comment about range had turned into something much deeper. Without attacking, without humiliating anyone, he had transformed the moment. And as the applause slowly began to rise, genuine, steady, and powerful, it became clear that calm dignity had done what anger never could. The applause that followed wasn't explosive at first. It was steady, rising gradually like a wave building strength. The host blinked, clearly surprised by how deeply the moment had landed. Wow, he said softly, leaning forward. That's powerful. The energy in the studio had completely shifted. What began as light entertainment had turned into something almost intimate. And sensing the sincerity in the room, the host decided to take the conversation in a direction no one expected. You mentioned being lucky, the host continued carefully, but there's something the audience might not know. He glanced toward the production team, who nodded subtly. A lot of people in this industry have stories about you, stories you've never talked about publicly. The crowd murmured with curiosity. Keanu's expression changed slightly, not nervous, but modest, as if he already knew where this was heading and wished it wouldn't. The large screen behind the stage flickered to life. A pre-recorded video began to play. It showed a middle-aged stunt coordinator standing on a film set, holding a helmet in his hands. "Most people don't know this," the man said into the camera, "but when our department was struggling during a production shutdown, one actor gave up part of his salary so we could keep our jobs." The audience grew quiet again. He never asked for credit. In fact, he told us not to tell anyone. The camera cut back to the studio, where all eyes slowly turned toward Keanu Reeves. The video continued. A visual effects artist appeared next. "My daughter needed emergency surgery," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Insurance wasn't covering everything. I was scared we might lose our home." She paused, taking a breath. He found out somehow, and the next day the hospital bill was paid. A ripple moved through the audience, not laughter this time, but emotion. Some people placed hands over their mouths. Others blinked rapidly, fighting tears. Back on the couch, the other actor shifted again, no longer leaning confidently but sitting upright, hands clasped tightly together. The playful smirk from earlier had completely disappeared. The host turned toward Keanu, almost speechless. "Why don't you ever talk about this?" he asked quietly. Keanu looked slightly embarrassed by the attention. "It's not something to talk about," he replied simply. "A lot of people help others every day. I just did what I could." The applause that followed was thunderous, not because of a clever comeback, but because of character. It wasn't forced or dramatic. It was earned. The moment didn't just expose the contrast between two actors. It revealed the difference between noise and substance. And as the camera zoomed out, capturing a standing ovation from parts of the audience, it became clear that the insult from earlier no longer mattered. Something far more powerful had taken its place. Quiet integrity, shining brighter than any spotlight. The standing ovation didn't fade quickly. It rolled through the studio like thunder, people rising from their seats not because they were told to, but because they felt compelled to. The host looked out at the audience, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've been doing this for a long time," he said, his voice softer now, stripped of its usual comedic rhythm. "And I don't think I've ever seen a moment shift like this." The cameras panned across emotional faces, then slowly settled once again on Keanu Reeves, who looked almost uncomfortable with the spotlight. The other actor attempted a small laugh, clapping lightly as if to blend into the applause. "Well, that's amazing," he muttered, clearing his throat. But the confidence he carried earlier was gone. The audience could feel it. Social media notifications were already exploding across the country. Clips of the insult had circulated within minutes, but now, the clips of Keanu's response and the surprise tribute were spreading even faster. What had started as a sharp joke was turning into a public lesson in real time. The host turned to Keanu one final time. "After everything you've been through, after the losses, the setbacks, the years in this industry, how do you stay this grounded?" It was a sincere question now, not entertainment. Keanu took a breath, looking down briefly before answering. "I've had people show me kindness when I didn't expect it," he said quietly. "I've learned that the applause fades, the headlines fade, but how you treat people, that stays." His words weren't dramatic. They weren't rehearsed. They felt lived. He then glanced gently toward the other actor, not with anger, not with triumph, but with calm understanding. "We're all just trying to do our best," he added. "Sometimes we forget what really matters." There was no accusation in his tone, no humiliation, just perspective, and somehow that made it even more powerful. The audience didn't cheer wildly this time. Instead, a deep, unified applause filled the space, slower, heavier, meaningful. As the show cut to commercial break, the camera captured one last wide shot of the stage, bright lights, polished floors, and two very different men sitting on the same couch. Within hours, the internet would crown Keanu the winner of a battle he never tried to fight. Headlines would praise his composure. Comment sections would defend his humility. But inside that studio, in that single quiet exchange, something more important had happened. An insult meant to entertain had turned into a reminder that dignity doesn't shout, kindness doesn't compete, and true character doesn't need to prove itself. And long after the laughter faded, that was the moment people would remember.